At the beginning, Starbucks sold coffee beans, which we could grind for you. We did not sell beverages at first. We did give away samples of really fine coffee. Beverages came later. Valuation is important because it's going to determine how much the entrepreneur gets to keep. That's for you and your family, so that's important. The purpose is important. It's equally important that everybody on the team agree on the purpose. And if they don't agree, then maybe the purpose needs to be adjusted a little bit. And the investors too. Investors love to brag about the successful companies. They will never say one word about the bad investments to their friends. Over the last 50 years, one fad after another, one hot thing after another. And right now it's AI. So if you are unfortunately not anything close to AI, that's a problem.
En esta edición tengo el enorme privilegio de conversar con Zev Siegl, cofundador de Starbucks. Zev nos lleva de regreso a los primeros días de la marca que cambió para siempre la forma en la que millones de personas disfrutan el café. Más allá de la historia empresarial, comparte reflexiones profundas sobre el valor de la mentoría, la importancia de escuchar más de lo que se habla y cómo la pasión y la curiosidad pueden sostener proyectos durante décadas. También hablamos sobre cómo mantener la esencia de una empresa a medida que crece, cómo elegir mentores que te reten y por qué el propósito debe ser siempre el centro del negocio. Ahora sí, lo dejo con mi conversación con Zev Siegl, cofundador de Starbucks.
It's an honor to have this opportunity to interview you, Zev, and share your wisdom, your experience with everyone here at this program. And let's start by the beginning. Let's start by the early days of Starbucks. Let's give us this brief intro, or let's visit Pike Place Market back in 1971.
Well, in 1971, the world of gourmet coffee just didn't exist in the United States. I mean, there was nothing. And we were interested in coffee. My partners and I had postal mail ordered some interesting coffees from a company in Canada, and there was one in San Francisco. And one day when we were meeting, which we had started meeting in the summer of 1970 to figure out what we could do with our lives. You know, like some of the people that are on this call, we had been to college, we had our first jobs, and we were kind of restless. You know, our first jobs, all three of us were working for big organizations. And, we wanted something that was more us, that we could have more input into. So we eventually decided that, that a coffee company would be an interesting idea. And the three of us did not have business degrees, by the way. That's an important aspect. There's another important part about the three of us. We each had different skills. Thank God, because that meant that the three partners could all contribute their talent. And we had very limited capital. I'm sure that everybody on this call has very limited capital. Nobody ever has enough. So it was a new idea in Seattle. I had two ideal partners, but we didn't really know that much about the coffee industry. And the coffee industry at that time was mass market only, with one or two exceptions in the United States. We needed a mentor. And so we started looking around. I did a lot of research. In those days, you did research in the library. And the place where I found our mentor was in the public library of Seattle, in the dusty room where they kept telephone books from around the country. And I used what we call the yellow pages, the commercial part of the phone books. And I found that in some cities, there were, coffee companies that sounded like maybe they would be trying to produce good coffee instead of mass market coffee. And then I found one in San Francisco. And then I looked for articles about this company, and I found a couple and realized, this was a really interesting company. It had just opened 4 years before, in the late 60s. So I called the man in the article who was listed as the founder. His name was Alfred Peet. And this is something that I think everybody on the call will appreciate. So I dialed his number on a dial telephone, and he answered the phone himself. This is, God is on my side. Not a secretary, not somebody out in the warehouse. He answered the telephone himself. And I explained that, my partners and I were interested in starting a coffee company, and we would love to have some advice from him. And there was a long silence at the end of the other end. I mean, way too long. And everybody on this call has experienced that, where you're in a business call and the other person goes silent for too long. And then he said, he had a Dutch accent. He was from Holland. And he said, Zev, if you're thinking about starting a coffee company, I think you better come down to San Francisco and talk to me. And I did what everybody would do. I went to San Francisco and talked to him. I mean, as fast as I could, I got down there. And that led to him becoming a mentor for us. But this was a mentor sent from heaven. I mean, he knew everything about coffee all over the world, everything about owning a small little coffee company where you roast coffee. He was the perfect mentor. The only problem was that he was what we call old school. He was everything. He had an answer for every question, and he thought he had the perfect answer. So, there was no room for disagreement. So those are the things that really got us going. We had very little competition in Seattle at that time, and we got off to a good start, but it was thanks to our mentor.
That's amazing. And sometimes now we see what Starbucks has become, and we take it sort of for granted. There was that concept wasn't there back then. Everything. So that's amazing. And that takes me to my follow-up question to your story. It's, what did you learn from those early days? What were those key takeaways about product quality, customer experience, building networks, just like the one you did with Pete?
Well, I've had a lot of time to think about this, more than 40 years. And I interact today with lots of entrepreneurs, and usually after a session, I think about what they're doing. And then sometimes I think about, well, if I could turn the clock back, what would I think about the beginning of Starbucks? I mean, you just can't help yourself. You can't keep from doing that. And I have decided that one of the great things that mattered to the early success of the company was a very, very positive experience that the customers had. They would come into our first location. We were manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers. We're a vertically integrated company. So very small. Don't be thinking about the global Starbucks. This is a little company in Seattle, Washington. And from the customer's point of view, they would walk into the store and the aroma of coffee would practically knock them over. I mean, it was just very aromatic. And that's a nice thing. That's a positive experience. And then they'd look around the store, what's this? And it looked pretty good. Now, we built the first store ourselves because we were undercapitalized. And that store looked good, but you wouldn't want to look, we didn't want anybody to look too carefully because it was sort of like a stage set. It only looked good. And our later stores were built by professionals and they looked a lot better. But the experience of the customer, they've gotten this wonderful hit of aroma. The store looks interesting, very professional. And then the person behind the counter starts talking to them. We always initiated conversations. And we trained all our employees to do that too. And the questions would be, sort of personal so that the customer experience could begin to develop a relationship. So we would say something like, tell me about how you make coffee at home. It's a fairly innocent question and people would always answer it. But then they're involved with us, or then that started the relationship. And then we would, of course, give them lots of information. Sometimes we would give them a sample of our really good coffee too. Just for the people that are watching this, at the beginning, Starbucks sold coffee beans, which we could grind for you. We did not sell beverages at first. We did give away samples of really fine coffee. Beverages came later. That was a pivot. So I would say that the high quality of the customer experience was the most important thing at the beginning.
Something that you mentioned sort of sounds similar to what most of us, entrepreneurs are doing, is that when we're building our MVP, we don't want the customer to look too deep into it, because some parts are not perfect. But you do have
there's no back end, right?
Correct. But you do want to have that experience you mentioned about the aroma, and it brings you in, to experience it and so on.
And we all have the software to do that. You can make something look really good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it sounds like very similar, the physical world to the digital world. There's those lessons, I think, apply to both sides.
I agree.
So this weekend in the program, we've learned about networks, and you've been networking for more than 40 years. It helped you in building your business, but more specifically, you've talked a lot about mentorship and the role of mentors. So I would like to understand more, like, what's a mentor for you, and especially this trait that I've heard you mention before about emphasizing on listening as a key trait.
A lot of people want to become mentors, and I really hope that eventually everybody who's watching us during this discussion will someday mentor other people. It's something that we all need to do, and I would say that in this session everybody is observing that I'm doing a lot of talking. But if we were in a session where I was being a mentor, I would be doing a lot of listening. And I would be asking open-ended questions to try and get the entrepreneur to talk to me about what's really bothering them. All of us mentors, we have a tendency to be very positive, but it's very hard to be a mentor if all you're going to hear is positive stuff. So the question that I almost always ask is, I'll say, tell me, Louisa, when you wake up at night, what's bothering you? And that's a question that always gets the right answer.
It's a powerful question.
Yeah. The answer is usually something like, I think we're going to run out of money in 60 days. I mean, now we can talk about something. Now it's not so positive and lovely. And I've had to learn to do that. It is not something that was natural to me. And but I did learn it. I got a little bit of training. It's a little bit like being a therapist, a psychotherapist. You have to learn how to get the patient to open up to you. And you don't do that by talking all the time.
And when was the first time that you learned this trait? Is there any story you can share with us?
Oh, I mean, you mean when did I learn this trait? I would say it was about 12 years ago. I took some training in how to be a good mentor and how to help people. And the first thing that came up was, you have to stop talking.
That's good. That's good advice. And share us now like a moment that this mentoring, this training to be a good mentor has actually led to improve a team's performance or a founder's performance.
Well, it happens in many, many ways. It's not every relationship that I have is different, and all entrepreneurs are different. So, we're human beings, right? We're not all the same. So, pretty typically it begins with, I'm going to be doing the entrepreneur will say, I'm going to be doing a presentation next week for an investor. And these days that means usually online, which is fabulous. It's much better than doing it in person. And So I'll ask them, well, would you like to give it to me? And they'll say, you mean right now? I said, yeah, right now. So they'll put the deck up on the screen, the PowerPoint, and go through it. And that's a place where any mentor can be really helpful, because if you're not the entrepreneur, you can see things that aren't quite right. Maybe there's one thing that happens all the time. It's usually on one of the 12 slides, there'll be a word that's misspelled. That happens, happens to me. And that's really bad, because it's sitting there on the screen, and the person you're talking to is thinking, they can't even spell right. So, I mean, that's the little thing. And then maybe they'll make a statement about the market that happens to leave out the biggest competitor in that sector of the market. They just won't mention them. And then I'll say something like, well, what about Bancomex, which they've left out. And they say, oh yeah, Bancomex. And it turns out they left them out because they're afraid of them. So those are things that happen. But there also are connections that happen through mentors, just like they happen through accelerators. There was one case where a couple in southern Spain had a website that was for pet owners and pet suppliers, especially dogs. They were very interested in dog owners. And there was a connection website, connected advertisers to consumers. And there was a woman that they wanted to have on their advisory board. She was the owner of a really important pet food company in Europe. Mm-hmm. All the top brands were owned by this one company. And they said, it'd be really great to get her to be on our advisory board. And so we talked about how they would ask her, and they did that. And then 2 weeks later, they contacted me and said, no answer. She didn't answer us. And that's really sad, right? Yeah. So I said, I'm going to write her. So I sent a message through LinkedIn to this woman, and I signed it Zev Siegl, co-founder, Starbucks Coffee Company. That got her attention. And what I said to her was, those people from Spain that just contacted you last week, they are the real thing. They know what they're doing, and they would love to have you. So she answered them. Now, as a mentor, that's just making a connection, but it meant a lot. It really was important to me that she responded and became an advisor to them. That's my reward, just to make that connection.
That's amazing. So besides, a mentor being sort of like helping role-playing certain roles, like an investor, a business partner, you have to have a very complicated conversation. You can put yourself in those shoes. Another role of the mentor is to help open certain doors, because you already have a relationship with that person, so you know more about the business. So it's a truly genuine connection you can do. Mm-hmm. So beyond those two things, how else would you describe a mentor, and how do you think that this impacts the most on founders?
Well, I think that mentors can be really helpful in the interaction between the entrepreneur and potential sources of funding. This is a scary proposition. It's it's a little bit like going to the hospital where you're bleeding. You're bleeding money, and you want somebody to help it stop. And in this case, you're bleeding so much that you need funding to get the company going. You've worked really hard to get it right. And I've been around early stage companies, starting with Starbucks 50 years ago. And especially in the last 12 years, I've been doing a lot of mentoring, mostly online. And I can say that every interaction that an entrepreneur has with potential sources of funding, whether it's a bank or a foundation or an individual investor or a family office, it doesn't matter. Everything has to be rehearsed. You don't do this casually. I mean, you work so hard to get the meeting. You find the person, you get them to agree on a certain time next week to, you're going to both log on. And why would you try to do it casually? And what a waste. I mean, if you don't do it correctly, if you make an obvious mistake that you could have corrected if you thought about it, you'll want to kill yourself. So you rehearse. Interestingly enough, most entrepreneurs don't rehearse their meetings, but I try to get them to do it. And there are many ways to rehearse. You can do it like we are doing it, except you're just recording it. You don't have a live audience. You can do it in person with a friend who makes believe that they're an investor. They put on a Rolex. That's how you can tell. You make sure that the slide deck that you're going to show actually looks pretty good. And probably when I say pretty good, I mean, it doesn't look like everybody else's slide deck. There's a problem because a lot of entrepreneurs use formats, but they forget that the investor sees slide decks every day. They've seen 50 slide decks in the last 6 months. I'm sure Jaime has. And so, you can tell when they're using a format and it gets kind of boring to look at. So there's that.
It also shows not enough interest in perfecting, or you didn't put the time in, so it's an indicator. Exactly. It doesn't have to look like 100% beautiful, but good enough.
And then another issue in the relationship with investors is valuation. This is a huge deal to the investor. I find that most entrepreneurs could care less about valuation. They just want to get the money, and but valuation is important because that's going to determine how much the entrepreneur gets to keep. That's for you and your family, so that's important. So, and then of course there's the financial forecast. Is it realistic? It's so great. Here's a typical scenario. You've got a woman who's really interested in your company. She's part of a family office, and she says, "Send me over your financial forecast, and I'll have one of our people look at it." This should set off an alarm bell in your head. I'll have one of our people look at it. So what do you think the job is of that person? The job of that person is to find something wrong in your forecast.
Of course.
And if they find something big enough that's wrong, they're going to tell the investor not to invest. And that's a really big deal. So you want your forecast to be, the expression I use is bulletproof.
Yes.
It absolutely cannot be faulted. And the way you do that is to keep improving it, of course. As you get more information, as each month goes by, you improve the forecast. One of the really important things in forecasts is customer retention. Experienced entrepreneurs know about customer retention, and you make sure that they use a ratio, a percentage that will make sense to everyone. Inexperienced people who don't ask for help use whatever they want. But the investor sees a lot of presentations. So when they look at your finances and you have this customer retention rate of 55%, they are going to go nuts. They're going to say, you have to revise that. And you don't want that. You want to be ahead of them, not behind them. So that's what I have to say about that interaction.
Perfect. Before we move on, another topic about success factors for early stage founders and plannings and execution strategies and so on. I would like to take now some questions from the audience because I see a lot of activity there. So let's help us
Oh my God,
put
so
some
much activity, guys.
Kokata.
Probably the comments are something like, "Who is this guy?"
No, Zev, everybody knows you here. You're famous. First, I want to tell you, like, people are saying this kind of comments. This is a great session, incredible insights. And also, just to show you, and they say, if you come to Chile, I'm from Argentina, but if you go, I'm going as well.
Okay.
Don't feel the pressure.
No.
Not just beside the jokes. Pablo Aravena.
I can see the question.
Yes.
So Pablo, this is a really great question. And people in faraway places, and Santiago is a pretty faraway place. I mean, it takes, when I go for me in Seattle, to go to Santiago, I have to first fly to Texas, and then I can fly 9 hours overnight. So it's pretty far. And the answer is LinkedIn is your friend. And so is Impacta and all of these other ways of contacting people. I feel very strongly about this. If you are reading online, and I'm sure you are, Pablo, about a team in San Francisco that seems to be 2 years ahead of you, and they're really interesting. They're not a competitor really, but they've established themselves, and you like what you read about them. Why not contact one of them on LinkedIn? And you might be thinking, "Oh, Zev, that's crazy. They're not going to answer," but they might. And especially if you do it sort of humbly, on your knees. For example, you might say, "I'm enrolled in an Impacta accelerator in Santiago. We're making progress. We don't want to make big mistakes. Could we meet with you for 1 hour, 2 times, starting next week? And the first meeting could be on Thursday, the 15th at 3:00 your time, sir." So you might be thinking, "Yeah, and I know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to click off. That's ridiculous." But it's not true. It's not true. A lot of people will take that bite like a fish, and they'll say, "I can't meet with you on Thursday at 1:00. How about Friday at 2:00? You've got them. And believe me, I've seen it work many, many times. It's important to be respectful, to not to pump yourself up as something that you are not yet. And it's also important to ask for a specific time and not to ask for a long-term relationship. You just want to talk to them for an hour, maybe twice. And of course, what you're hoping, like I did with Alfred Peet in the 1970, what you're hoping is that it turns into a really great relationship, but you don't say that. And I'm telling you, it works. You can go way outside of Chile into any place in the world where you think there's somebody that you've heard about who might be willing to help you.
That's I can say, Zev, that works. I've tried it in the past. I was doing my master's degree, and we decided we wanted to reach to someone who can be our mentor for the program, and we wrote to Disney CTO, and she replied yes. But we did exactly.
So great.
It's amazing. But we did exactly what you said. It's like, don't ask for something long term. It's like we wanted just one call. We were a group of people taking the program. We're learning this subject this week, so it was very specific what we're going to talk about. And then we had more than one meeting because she got to know us. She liked what we're doing. So
what you did when you did is from the point of view of the person you were trying to get to mentor you, you narrowed down the engagement. You made it so it's not forever, And it's not about just everything in the world that has to do with business. We just want to talk to you about this. Yeah. Now, of course, you're hoping that you'll get to talk about everything, but sometimes you do. Yeah, that's great. A great story.
4 years ago, guys, we saw somebody put Zev as a mentor, and we think each other like, let's write Zev, and everybody say he will never write you back, and he and he did. So now we are for a long-term relation already.
It's a good example. Yeah, that's a really good example.
There's another question from Mariano.
Oh, that's a kind of a general question. Personally, Mariano, I would say that my personal biggest challenge was ignorance. Remember, I didn't go to business school. At the beginning, I didn't know that much about coffee, just as a consumer. I didn't know about it as a producer. I certainly hadn't been in the retail business. So that's a lot of problems. There are a lot of things missing. So I would say that my personal ignorance was a problem. Now, remember, I had 2 partners, wonderful guys, and we're still friends, which is amazing because we're all over 80 now. we're not only friends, we're alive. And they had some knowledge that was pretty useful. So that reduced some of the problems that we would have had otherwise. If I had been a solo entrepreneur, or if I'd been alone, I don't think you and I would be talking today.
Nice answer. There's another one of Pablo Aravena.
Yeah. Oh, Pablo. Don't we all wish that we could turn the clock back? In the United States, we call that life rewind. You want to turn the film back and start again. Yeah, there are a lot of things that I wish I could do. Well, I would say that it would be, in my case alone, it would be financial literacy. I just wasn't very good at forecasting. In the beginning, I was one of those entrepreneurs that just likes to go for it, just do it. Never mind the numbers. But fortunately, one of my partners, Jerry Baldwin, didn't have that problem. And he quickly became, I'd say within a year, became a very good financial manager. And that saved us. So I wish that I had the ability to do financial forecasting and to verify that our performance was matching our forecast. And if it wasn't matching, it never matches. If it wasn't matching, to figure out why. Why had the forecast been wrong? And remember, forecasts can be wrong in a good way and a bad way. But either way, you have to stop and think, why weren't we accurate? So those are skills that I developed later. Fortunately, I had a partner who developed them earlier.
That's awesome. Jaime, we have a lot of questions. I could keep.
Let's take one more, and then we can continue, and we can go.
Well, I want to say something to the people who are watching this. Jaime just said that after we take another question, we can continue. You remember I said that it's really an important thing to rehearse your presentations to investors. Do not think that Jaime and I are having this casual conversation where we've never met each other before. That's the way we want it to look, but that's not the reality. Jaime and I
Don't spoil it, Zev.
Jaime and I have spoken twice prior to this meeting last week. And we wanted this presentation to go well for you, the people that are watching. And that's important to rehearse. Go ahead.
Bruno Carboni says.
Bruno, how was your? Oh, I've had Bruno, I actually have had a couple of big failures in my life. Starbucks, I was part of Starbucks for its first decade, only for the first 10 years. And then my partner stayed for another 4 years. So they were in for 14 years. Experiencing failure is pretty terrible. We could talk for 2.5 hours about this. I'm going to restrict it to 2 points. One is it can make you a little crazy. And the stress level is so high when your company starts to run out of money, or you're losing market share, or whatever it is. It really affects your mental stability. And I can tell you that at one point, I had a company that was in big trouble. And this was in the 90s. And I had to go see a therapist, a psychologist, because I was just not functioning very well. So that's a big problem. And then the other aspect of dealing with failure is that you have to find a way to maintain your relationship with your network. You might want those investors to invest in you next year. So how are you going to do that? And the best story about this, I was working with a young guy in Mexico City, really interesting man. And he was on his second company. And I asked him about the first company. He said it failed. I said, were you a partner? He said, yes. He said, but I wasn't the senior partner. I wasn't the CEO. So the investors, when the company started to fail, fired the CEO. That's a reality in the world of entrepreneurship. That can happen. And so they fired the CEO, and they put this guy in his place and told him to wind down the company. Wind down is an expression in the business world here in the United States. It means to close the company down. But of course, the investors wanted him to close the company down in a way that would get them some money. They didn't want to lose everything. And he was able to accomplish that. Instead of losing everything, they lost 50% of what they had invested. He actually sold the software they had developed to another company. And I heard the story because it came out when I asked him who he was talking to about funding his new company. And he said, well, it's actually the investors in my former company. He said, the one that failed? They're going to invest in you again? And he said, well, remember, I wasn't the CEO, but I did help them get some of their money back. And they really appreciated that. So that's another way to deal with failure, is to think about the future and to hang on to those investors by trying to do everything you can to rescue them.
That's awesome. Let me add to that story. Something very similar happened to me in the past. I did a biotech company and it didn't work out. And I felt really bad, of disappointing our investors. So I emailed the owner of the fund, not the partner who invested, but the owner, and told him about what we did, our struggles, what we accomplished, but eventually we failed. And I was not expecting him to actually reply my email, but I felt like I had to do it. He did reply, and he said, and I still have it, saved in my email. He said that, he's been an entrepreneur. He knows how hard it is, and that he knows that we did everything we could with the money we had and the time we had. So the ones that risked the most wasn't him, was us. And the next time you have an idea, come and pitch it again to me, because I wanna invest. So that sort of mentality is amazing.
That's a wonderful story, Jaime. But the thing I want to caution the people who are with us today is that you have to be in a good mental state to do something like Jaime just described. You have to, not be crying at night, not wandering around drinking beer all day. You really have to be together, and that's sometimes a bigger problem. And that's why I mentioned the possibility of getting some therapy so that you can do things like Jaime just described. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's very, very stressful to be in a company that is failing.
Totally. 100%. It was not a beautiful time in my life, but I wouldn't change it for anything.
I can understand.
So continuing the rehearsal, I also told you, Steph, that in the past session we had Adrián Trucios, who's the founder of Airbag, and he shared with us that you are his mentor, and he spoke very highly about you. But also he mentioned that when he started Airbag, he didn't have this inspirational story about the purpose behind doing his company. It's not a relative that had an accident or someone close. He just thought it was a really good opportunity to tackle. What about your case, Zev? Was there a bigger purpose behind that or not? And do we all have to have that sort of purpose to do a business?
Well, yeah, I think that's the case, but the purpose can have a wide variety. Adrián Trucios' company, which is based in Mexico City and does business in Mexico and in Colombia, has a purpose of increasing safety on the road for truck drivers, which is a great benefit to the owners of fleets of trucks. His customers love him. So that's enough of a purpose, I think. In our case, with the beginning of Starbucks, when nobody had ever heard of this company, and we were selling beans, not beverages, our purpose was to bring extraordinarily good coffee to Seattle. Really, that's what we wanted to do, and we did it. And our mentor, Alfred Peet, kept beating us on the head and saying, "No compromise on quality." He'd say that to us every time we talked to him. Do not make any compromise about the coffee. And he had while we're at it, he had another thing. Do not discount the coffee. Because if you discount the coffee, you are saying it's just a product. It's not just a product. It's the best thing you can make. Now that only works in the coffee business. These are purpose. Our purpose was to introduce our entire city, our entire market, to the idea of really high quality coffee. Now, if you're in the software business, well, let's go back to the example of the couple I mentioned in Spain, who are bringing together dog owners and people who want to sell things to pet owners. They are really committed to pets. They have a dog themselves, and they use the dog in their advertising, and they're very interested in helping both sides. They're trying to do something that they think is very good in the world to help pet owners. One of the key things that made their company successful is they realized that pet owners like to take vacations with their little doggy, and that there are hotels and restaurants and all kinds of businesses that are in that city that they're going to visit. So they would try to make it possible for those businesses to reach their subscribers. And they felt that they were serving a real purpose. There's another company that I've been working with for several years, not as often as I'd like, maybe twice a year. And they have a system for getting plastic trash out of rivers. And they started in South America. And basically, it's a very sophisticated screen that they put across a small river. It collects trash like crazy. And then they recycle the trash. Most trash is mostly plastic. Then they reprocess it and use it. So those guys, you can imagine what their purpose is. They're trying to save the planet. And that kind of passion is just part of what they're doing in every presentation, include before they get to the slides where the finances are and market share and all that other stuff and the technical problems. They always talk about the purpose, and they show gruesome, terrible pictures of trash on the banks of rivers. So this is a bad thing, and their passion lies with saving the environment. The purpose is important. It's equally important that everybody on the team agree on the purpose. And if they don't agree, then maybe the purpose needs to be adjusted a little bit. So everybody has to be in sync about that. and the investors too. But usually investors are in sync or they wouldn't invest.
And what about, companies that are more like a B2B SaaS that are building some enterprise tool? Like, does purpose matter
Oh, yeah.
there?
Yeah, you would think that that's a very good question. Yeah, it matters. They want their baby, their software, to do good in the world, to help companies, and I mean that's a purpose I can get excited about myself. And it's not like saving the planet, but it is doing good for a certain narrow type of customer.
Yeah.
Like say people that make automobile tires. Maybe you have software that's really great for them, and yeah, that's pretty boring, right? Automobile tires. But if you can do good for them, and they say, your software is really helping us out a little bit. Our profits went up about 5% over the last 2 years. Boy, that is just like winning the World Cup. It makes you feel so good. You achieved your purpose.
Yeah. Well, yes. Sometimes we're always looking too much on the ones that are like world changing, but sometimes it's good to have a purpose to help SMBs to stay in business, large corporates to make their process more efficient so their customers are happier. So there's things you can do, but how can we avoid losing the purpose throughout the growth of a company? Like, how did you avoid losing purpose at those early years at Starbucks?
Early Starbucks is maybe not the best example. Let's think of a company where you have, how should we put it, powerful investors. You went after what we call smart money, people who can help you with more than money. They know, they have connections, they have experience. That's smart money. And you get them. But the thing about smart money is that they might want you to do things differently than you are thinking you're going to do them. And so, including your purpose, they might want you to pivot into something you're not interested in at all. Not only that, you think it's a bad idea to pivot that way. There's too much competition over there. And yeah, these things happen where people will try to drag you away from your purpose. Sometimes it's a customer. Oh, you've done such a great job on helping us produce tires less expensively. We also produce the wheel that the tire goes on, the steel wheel. Maybe you can help us with that. We don't know anything about steel. Yeah, there are all these forces that will try and drag you around into places that you really didn't want to go. And the way I suggest that people deal with that is to make the financial argument, because that's an argument that gives you a stronger position. So, the stupid example that I just said, that you have software for people that make tires, and now they want you to make software for people that make the steel wheels that the tires go on. It would be very easy to make a financial argument why you're not going to do that. First of all, you'd have to go through the development of the software. And we just don't happen to have $150,000 to do that. And then it turns out that the market for steel wheels is completely different than the market for tires. There are too many competitors or whatever it is. And so the competition factor is really bad. And the people that are trying to get you to do this didn't stop to think about that. So you make a very rational argument, not an emotional argument. It's on the finances and the marketplace, and you're the voice of reason. You're the business person. You let them be the emotional person. And usually the people trying to get you to do something that isn't going to work will kind of quietly, slowly drop it.
Before we go, Zev, to more questions from the audience, I want to cover one more topic, which is the reason of the program, fundraising, getting capital. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to explore a little bit the initial funding that you got for Starbucks. Can you share us a little bit about that those early investments that you got, and what you learned about those things that you might think that are relevant for everyone here.
In many ways, even though it was so long ago, well, I can stun the viewer here for a minute. There were no computers. We used adding machines. Okay, there were no cell phones. We had dial tones. I mean, this is a long time ago, but it's amazing that the funding that we got has a lot in common with the way people get funded now. Of course, the founders put in a little money. I'm not going to tell you the number that we put in $1970 because that doesn't make any sense anymore. But it would be like putting in $10,000 each. There are three of us. 10,000 today dollars. Okay, that's fine. Then we put in a ton of sweat equity. We were very much like a software company where the founders of the company are actually writing the software. What we did is we built the first store with our hands. I mentioned that earlier. And I can give you an example. Let's see, the bins and the shelving in the store, the bins for the coffee, I built those in my parents' basement, the lower level of their home. So sweat equity, right? And we were able to save a tremendous amount of money by building almost everything on the first store ourselves. And we got a small bank loan. You'll love this story. So we went to a bank. We were sent to a particular banker by a friend. And it was a classic scene in 1970. The banker, we were 26 years old. The banker must have been 104. He was probably 60 years old, but he looked like an old man to us. And it was in the old style bank with the high ceilings. And so he interviewed us. And eventually he loaned us, this is the real number, $5,000. That would be like $15,000 today, right? $5,000. Almost nothing. And it turned out later that the only reason that he did it, which he concealed from us, the only reason he did it was because the person who had sent us there telephoned him before we got there and said, if you don't make this loan, I'm going to pull my account. I'm going to leave you. So he made the loan.
You got very powerful friends, Zev.
As it turned out. Yeah. So there we are, sweat equity, a little money from the owners, and a $5,000 loan. So I think everybody watching knows what happened. We ran out of money. And we ran out of money in a very funny way. You know that expression, go for it? That's what we did. We signed a lease for our second store, and we purchased a roaster and installed it in a warehouse in the city, somewhere else in the city. Bad idea. So we used up all the capital that we had. Remember, our store was profitable. We had one store open. It was profitable. We weren't losing money on our operations. But we were investing in a second store and in this roasting operation. So it just took our capital and made it disappear, which is something that a 26-year-old would do. I wouldn't do that today. Neither would you, right? But we did. And we were rescued because our first store was so successful. It's a little bit like your MVP or your beta version is a success. People love it and you're getting good reviews. That'll really help if you need money. And that's what happened to us. So one of my partners, Jerry Bolden, realized that three of his friends who were customers at our store had all three just made some money separately. And so they had what looked to us like a lot of money. It wasn't. And they each invested, I think in 1972 dollars, it was about $50,000. And that cleaned off our debt. We paid all our vendors. And now we were a profitable company with 2 stores and a roasting plant and no debt because we had brought in this equity. So there was like a gold rush to try and get our business. Banks loved us now. That's the ideal customer for a bank. You're a success. You've been in business 2 years and you're profitable. Can we loan you some money? And that's what happened. And from then on, this is from the second year until the 10th and 12th year, we lived on debt. We didn't need any investment because every store we opened was profitable. And we also developed a wholesale business, which is pure profit. That really worked well for us. We had 300 wholesale accounts. And so we were a solid little company at that point. So that's how we made it. Now, most of the people that are involved in tech companies that I work with now today, it's different. You need quite a bit of money up front because you have to pay developers and other people. And that's a big problem because the team usually develops the MVP. Maybe they can even go so far as the beta version and they have a customer who's using it. And then every night they have to change the software because it's not working. And they get it. It's sort of like a car engine starting. It starts to run and then it stops and it starts to run again. And finally it started to run smoothly. And then at that point you can get funding. And it's what I call front loading. You have to get the money up front because you have to develop the software so that it's not a beta version anymore. It's the real thing. It's version 1. And that takes money. So fortunately, all over the world, in most places, there are investors who want to talk to you if you're in that position. You've got something that's working, but you need money to keep growing.
Yeah. I find some parallel with your experience and also startups, which is at the beginning, your company is not that attractive. You're building your MVP. You're sort of somehow have something that works, not really attractive yet. But as soon as you have it sexy and attractive, investors want to go invest. So in your case, the banks saw you, you were sexy in the sense that you didn't have debt, you were profitable, so everybody wanted to invest. The same I see in startups. There's so many, and you need to be the one that stands out of the crowd, and then VCs want to invest in that one.
There's another
have you
thing
seen that was
There's another thing that can be positive or negative, and I'm sure people watching this know what I mean. There are fads. Things become popular. Like right now, even if you're not really using AI, you say you are, right? Because AI attracts investors today.
It's not very difficult. You just add .ai to your logo and your web.
People do that every day.
Why is not people doing that more? Yeah.
And I say, go ahead and do that because to me, it's the investors are a little bit like a herd of sheep. They always follow the lamb in front, and there have been over the last 50 years, one fad after another, one hot thing after another. And right now it's AI. So if you are unfortunately not anything close to AI, that's a problem. So for instance, in medical technology, it's wonderful if you're in the digital world, but if you are trying to develop a piece of equipment that's going to be next to the bed in the hospital, good luck, because investors don't really like equipment these days. But they used to think it was wonderful. Now I'm not going to do that anymore. So you have to be a little bit aware of these fads, these styles that are going on, and sort of add it to what you're doing.
Correct.
One of the companies that I work with, Adrian Trucios, the address of his company is airbagtech.io. Pretty smart.
Yeah.
There are lots of companies that have .ai.
Yeah, I used IO in the past because there was no .com, and that became like the second best you could use. Now I think that AI is like the second best after .com if you manage. Yeah. Okay, so let's take some questions from the audience because there's a lot there and they're really good. And then we'll wrap up with a couple more questions that I have for Seth.
I really appreciate that the software that Kata is using puts it on the screen in English. I just love it.
Cool. There's one. Let's bring back the purpose thing. So my friend Sergio Sotelo asked this one.
Oh, this is a very good question. I think I'm going to be very honest with Sergio about this. So Sergio, I mentioned that the three of us were working for big companies or organizations, and that we wanted to do something that had a little bit more of us in it, something that we could control, something that we could massage and change, and that wasn't going to be a career working for a big company. In my case, I realized today that what I wanted was what I call self-actualization. Self-actualization. I wanted to do something that was successful, that I had thought of and that I had done. And I really think, looking back, that was my inner motivation. It wasn't, in my case, I was very interested in coffee. I still am. I mean, look at the stuff sitting over here. But what I was really interested in was seeing if I could make something happen. Now, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are like that, but you will never hear them say it. I just want to make something go. But I think that there's a lot of that in entrepreneurship. There certainly was for me, and I think my partners were that way too. It's a strong motivation.
That's awesome. Here's one Zev of Andres, and you helped him before, and he's asking you now this one.
Yeah. She knows something about my strong perspective about venture capital. Okay, Andres, I will share it. So you hear about venture capital all the time, right? Now, venture capital is professionally managed money. These are not angel investors. It's not an investor club. It's professionally managed money. So, I mean, if you're a wealthy person, you turn some money over to a venture capital fund, and then you hope that they are able to give you a return. And it's the job of the 3 or 5 people that are running that fund to make sure they invest it into companies that are going to be successful. So what is the motivation of a venture capital person that you're talking to? Well, first of all, they aren't going to talk to you until you need, in the United States, it would be 5 million. In South America, at least 1 million. Then the venture capital will start to talk to you. They want you to be in business, you have customers, and you need a lot of money. And you have a reason for needing money. You're going to make a lot of money. So this makes venture capitalists pretty tough to deal with. I think Jaime has actually functioned as a venture capitalist a little bit, and but he's also been an entrepreneur. So he's going to have a lot to say about this also. So to me, most entrepreneurs are like the innocent child going to the mean witch. And I mean, it is really a difficult relationship. You have to prepare for it. You have to be confident, and you have to also be realistic, because venture capital people have so much experience. They have much more experience than angel investors. They see deals all the time. You know, in the United States, a medium-sized venture firm might look at 100 deals a month, and you're just the next one. So it's a very difficult relationship. But of course, being an entrepreneur, it's a challenge, right? So you want to try it and see if you can make it over to the finish line and get funded by a venture firm. And people do. I mean, it is possible to do that. But I would say that unless you have had a successful company previously, like Jaime, the venture capital people are going to hold back and see how you do. They're going to hold back for a while. And at the last minute, maybe they'll jump in. We should also talk about the concept of the lead investor for a minute. When you're below the venture level, you'll get a response from lots of angel investors and investment clubs and even family offices that will say, yeah, we're going to jump in, but not now. We're going to watch for a while. So, God, that is really not what an entrepreneur wants to hear. What, you're going to watch? I could die in the meantime. And so that's a little bit difficult. So at that level, you have to persuade them that now is the time to invest and that later, maybe you won't need them. Later, you're going to be talking to venture capital. And they'll say, well, it's risky now. You're not as safe an investment as you will be later. And so then you try to explain them everything that you've done. Hopefully you've already explained this before you get to this point. Everything that you've done to try and reduce risk. As a matter of fact, in general, when you're talking to any source of funding, a foundation or bank, whatever, if you mention that you are really excited about risk management, they will love you. You could say, here at Alpha Beta, we really believe in risk management. And here's what we do to try and reduce the risk that's inherent in a new business. You should talk openly about that.
The whole job of the VC is to de-risk every single opportunity and choose the one that has most potential probabilities of success. And we discussed that also previously about how the investor thinks. And I can say that I'm the sort of investor that when I hear a pitch, I'm very interested, engaged in what they're doing. I'm very excited on what the problem they're solving. If not, I would, after 1 minute, I'm like, thank you very much, but no. But usually most of the startups founders I listen to, they have really amazing problems they're solving. But what I really have to do afterwards is finding like the no's, the reasons why not. And I don't know if that's like the appropriate approach. What have you seen?
When I'm mentoring, I tell entrepreneurs, imagine you're having a face-to-face meeting. That is, you're in the office of the angel investor or the venture capital firm that you're trying to get to say they'll invest. You should imagine that the room that you're in, with the nice conference table, that room has 5 doors, and each door has a label on it. And one of the doors says incompetent management, another says too much competition. They're all each door is a reason why a sane investor would say, no, I'm not going to invest right now. So your job is in everything you do, the way you look, the way you make the appointment, the way your slide deck looks, is to realize that they want to say no, even though they're giving you the meeting, they really want to say no. So you try to block those doors. When you're doing your presentation, you were thinking, these guys need to know that we actually have some experience so that we are worthy of being invested in. So you mention your experience and you tell one story from your experience. And you do that with all the reasons that they will say no. Because if you don't, they are going to say no. They're going to open one of those doors and they are gone.
Awesome. So let's continue with another question I had there we go. Let's go with Pablo's question.
Oh, this is a very interesting question. This is an unusual question. Well, this is something I don't have a lot of experience with. This is a business owner who has a company maybe it's Pablo himself, and it exists. It's not losing money. Maybe it's returning some money to him, but it's not going anywhere. It's not growing. And I think the implication, what's behind this question, is he thinks that he has to make some kind of change in order to get the company to grow. And that's probably the case. Now, it might be that he should go back into the business. Well, for instance, the person who made Starbucks a global company is a man named Howard Schultz. He's retired now, but he is the person who took the Starbucks of Seattle, Washington, and made it into Starbucks in Chile and Starbucks in Poland and in Turkey, everywhere. And he is he's quite a guy, but he retired 3 times and came back. This must have been a nightmare for the people working for the company, but he came back 3 times because the company started to not grow. And he felt, and the board of directors also felt, that his energy and drive and his charisma, he had plenty of charisma, enabled the company to continue to grow. So he came back, and I must say that all 3 times the company started to take off again and grow. So it might be that, Pablo should go back into his own company. On the other hand, it might be that he needs to find a person to run the company, a new person to run the company who also has a lot of energy. He's going to have to incentivize them, probably with some form of equity, options probably, and let them run the company. Yeah, it's an interesting problem. That's not one I usually see, Pablo, but it does happen where people start a company and then go off and they let it run itself and they go off and do something. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
Great.
A question from Andres, and I want to ask you another question. Is about mentors, but could you explain with this question also what is your concept about social currency that you explained to us many years ago or some years ago, social currency in mentors?
You have to help me a little bit. I'm sorry. Social currency.
You once told us that you were speaking about mentors and the importance of it, and you say, and somebody asked you, how can we pay mentors? And you say there's a thing called
oh yeah.
Awesome.
Well, yeah, I still believe that. So you might be thinking, okay, you've got this woman in Buenos Aires who is interested in helping. She has agreed to meet with you a few times, and you're thinking, oh my God, what can we do for her? She's so wonderful. She's really helping us. 3rd meeting, so 4th meeting, a 5th meeting. Then she invites you to come to Buenos Aires to have lunch with her. I mean, it's turning into a wonderful relationship. And you're thinking, we don't ever want her to leave. We have to give her something. Maybe we should give her equity in the company. And I say to that, no. If she wants equity in the company, she will ask. You don't have to give it to her. And you can turn her down. That's okay. But you can give what I call intangible rewards. So what Kata called social currency. So what can you do for her? I mean, she's wealthy, successful, she's helping you, how sweet that is. What could you do for her? Well, you could do a lot of things for her. You can say nice things about her on LinkedIn. Maybe she'll like that. You can invite her to a very interesting meeting. Maybe if you're in Santiago, for example, maybe you're going to have a meeting in Santiago, but the location is really interesting. It's a building that's ultra modern, and you've rented a room in that building, and it's really fascinating. If you're a coffee company, that's easy. what we used to do in the coffee business, and people still do this all the time, is you invite the investor to a coffee tasting in your roasting plant. So they get to see coffee being roasted. They get to sample coffees and get an education. They can't get that by themselves. It's not available. So this is a way of being really nice to these people. But what if you're not a coffee company? What if you're a software company? Well, there's still ways you can do it. I mentioned you can have them come to a meeting. Let's see, I work sometimes with a company called IFA-G. It's in Cordoba, Argentina. It's a very technical company. They were going to be in Santiago at a time when I was in Santiago. And they had me come to lunch at their hotel. I can still remember everything about that lunch, because what they did is they were staying in a hotel, but they had also rented a room to use as a workshop. They were doing all kinds of things. They all had all their laptops open, and they were having lunch in that room, and they had me come and join them for lunch, that was brought into the room by the hotel. I can still remember that because it was so interesting to me. These guys were in another city. They weren't in their hometown in Cordoba. They were in Santiago. And it was, like seeing how the inside of the clock works. And I remember that very well. That was an intangible reward for me as a mentor. If you're making beer, you've got it made. Everybody likes to see beer being made. So, it just depends. But the intangible reward, not the monetary reward, not the equity, might be more important to a person who's funding you than you think.
Some additional ways, especially for software founders, to gain that or pay back that is through probably early access of the solution to that person.
Oh, yeah.
So they feel, like I'm getting things before the mainstream, or recognizing it through a post in LinkedIn or an article. People want recognition. They want that visibility. So those are a few extra that I'll share.
The Cordoba company, IFA-G, used to send me things that they were working on. They were just amazing. They'd attach them to an email, and I'd click on it. It would be this unbelievable cartoon of a person fixing an automobile. Unbelievable. And they were doing it to show me how technical they were. I liked it.
I remembered your story, Zev. It was not quite like this, but you say, imagine two rich and amazing people in a yacht. For example, Donald Trump and Elon Musk. They cannot compete of which has more money, and one tell the other, I'm helping a South American startups. And remember? And that was also
yeah. I'm sorry. Thank you for prompting me, Kata. That's absolutely true. But this is also true of investors. Investors love to brag about the successful companies. They will never say one word about the bad investments to their friends. It's like they've never made a bad investment. But if they may have an investment that succeeds, they will tell everybody. And that's a big reward for them. So it's also true for mentors. If you are helping a company that's really interesting and it appears to be succeeding, mentors will probably talk about it. I try not to do that so much because there's secrecy problems, privacy. But yeah, a lot of mentors will be very happy to be part of your success, even if they're not stockholders.
Yes, I agree. Kata, I want to do one question because it's related to what you just mentioned. And in the past session, as I mentioned, we had Adrian Trucios, and I asked him, my last question to him was, what's your question if you were interviewing Zev? And because, I needed insider information. So he said, okay, I have one question for Zev. And he said, why are you interested in helping Latin American entrepreneurs in particular? You can be advising entrepreneurs all around the world, but I know that you have a particular interest in Latin America. How come?
I'm fascinated by the situation in Latin America. It's true. But I want to say that I do help people all over the world. And Latin America isn't half of the people I talk to. It's more like 20%. Yeah, I find the situation really interesting. And it's changed so much over the last 15 years from when I first began mentoring. Now, there are people in Latin America who are part of investment organizations. There are accelerators in every major city. It's a whole ecosystem that has developed. And it's a wonderful thing for us entrepreneurs, for if you happen to be starting a company, better you should be doing it today than 15 years ago, especially if you're in South America or in Central America or in Mexico. And I mean, in the past, everybody you would talk to would say, "What's in it for me?" You need some things. Tell me what's in it for me. Today, you don't hear so much of that. It's today many people will say, "How can I help you?" And that's a big shift. And it's much more like the model in California, in the Silicon Valley. There's a lot of that in Silicon Valley. How can I help you? I'm going to help you today. Maybe you'll help me tomorrow. Who knows? It's an enormous difference, and I've enjoyed watching that. Also, there's a part of me that thinks that entrepreneurs in LATAM have a more difficult time than entrepreneurs, say, in Europe or in North America. And I don't like that. I object to that. And it makes me want to be more helpful. So that's another factor.
Awesome. So I know that we're running short on time. I want to know if we can maybe pop up one more question of the audience, and then I'll close with one quick question.
Sure. However you would like to do it, Jaime.
We have so many questions. Just the last one?
Maybe.
It's up to you.
Maybe.
Interesting one. Matthias from Wessex.
Wow, this is an exciting one. The brand building. Wow. So in the early stage, I should explain something about Starbucks that you probably don't know. I mentioned Jerry Baldwin, one of my partners, but I haven't mentioned Gordon Bowker, the third partner. Gordon played a pivotal role, and he did for other companies too. He made a career out of this. He helped us position Starbucks in its early days so that we would be true to our purpose of bringing good coffee to our marketplace, Seattle. And that we would do at everything we did would be focused on doing that. So it was Gordon and his partner, Terry Heckler. They had a business of helping companies with marketing. They helped develop the logo. They helped with the name, Starbucks. They didn't give us the name, but they helped us with it. And they helped with the interior design of our stores. They helped with our packaging. They did such a good job that for a while, people would come into the store and say, "Is this a franchise? Everything looks so polished and so good. Is this a franchise?" And we would explain to them, no, it's a local company. And we learned to understand that when they were asking if we were a franchise, what they were saying is, "Wow, did you guys do a good job on positioning this company?" And I see that in many companies. Let's go back to IFG in Cordoba, Argentina. One of the things that they did 2 years ago is they had a virtual conference for their customers and advisors, potential customers. And it was a riot. It was all virtual. We all had memes and we were wandering around in the room and we could control it. And it was a way of them demonstrating just how good they are with technology. And this was another, for them, it was a perfect thing to do because they're a technical company. And they impressed a lot of people with that virtual conference. So it depends on what business you're in. But it's important to remember that it's about more than the product or service that you're providing. It's everything. Let me give you another example. There are a lot of companies, even early stage companies, who do some social responsibility activities. Like they'll help a school, or they'll donate their product to a foundation, to a university to let the students use it. And those are wonderful things to do something socially responsible. And it's very, very important to talk about it in social media, on your website, in your blog, to be sure to say, we're doing all this cool stuff and we're giving it to some needy organizations and people, because that's part of who you are. Your potential customers will see that and say, oh, these are good human beings. They want to make money and they want to, make an impact in the world, but they also want to do some good. So it becomes part of how you are perceived.
That's awesome, Zev. Can we do just the last question, Jaime, the last one, because it's
Yes.
about coffee.
Sí.
Go for it.
Sí, señor. There you go.
Woo! Wow. Boy, that's really interesting. Well, clearly, John, I'd be happy to talk to you, in the future. But clearly, you have a similar problem to something that we faced in the early days of Starbucks, and that is convincing people that there was a big difference between the coffee that we were selling, which cost 2 times, double, that is, 100% more than the coffee they could buy in the supermarket in the 70s. So, we're all pretty smart people in the world. So everybody said, you got to be kidding. I can pay, we'll say $5 in the supermarket and you want $10 for the same amount of coffee. Why would I do that? So that's the same problem that you have, that John Espina is talking about when you're trying to build a foundation and instead of capturing existing demand. So I would say that you're going to have to turn into somewhat of a philosopher, John, when you're talking about this, and talk about not just your company and how you're going to make a profit, but how this is going to affect everybody's thinking, and that you're trying to change perception. Now, I have to say, John, that this is a tough road. It's going to be a tough journey, because anytime you want to change human behavior, it takes a lot of work. And that's why you see so many companies just doing something that's a little better than what's existing. But I would be happy to talk with you about this changing perception during a funding round. That's an interesting challenge. You have a question.
Yeah, let's close with the last question, and it's more for us to leave with a reflection. We can think about it in the following days. And my question to you is, what advice did you get when you were doing Starbucks that you think it was so meaningful that it's still valid for everyone here that is listening to us? What would you say that really changed the way you perceive things and you want everyone here to?
Yeah. I mean, I was already a very outgoing person. You can tell, by my persona here on the screen that, I'm not shy and I like people and I like engaging with people and answer, I love the questions that are being asked here. So that wasn't an issue. But I have to go back to, I'm sorry, to our key mentor. We had others, but Alfred Peet. If I had to do over again, I would still go into the coffee business. Fascinating. I love the coffee business. I still do. But it was from him that I learned the emphasis on quality of the product. No fooling around with the product. And something that we haven't talked about, customer education. A quick story. During the time when we were first getting together with Alfred Peet, he had each of us come down for a week to work in one of his stores. He only had a few stores. And so we got to see how they did it. Those were coffee bean stores also. And one of the things that I noticed immediately was how much education they were giving people. Here, we'll take a look at this coffee. This one's growing at 2,000 meters. This one's growing at 3,000 meters. This is roasted this way, on and on and on. There's so much about coffee, many, many details. And customers love it. They just really were hungry for the education. And I remember the pivotal moment for me when I decided that customer education was going to be my future was Alfred Peet himself was working in the store that I was working in one afternoon. I don't know why he was there. I don't remember. But a woman came in and said, I tried your coffee. I brewed it in a percolator and it tasted terrible. Percolators have disappeared. This was a kind of coffee maker that was very popular in the 1950s and 60s. They're gone now. Nobody has one. And during the brewing, a percolator recycled the coffee. So as it turned into coffee, it kept getting recycled in the machine, passing over the heating element. And it's true that the heating element actually made the coffee taste terrible. So a salesperson was working with this customer, and Mr. Peet, a few feet away, heard the word percolator in his ear. So he comes over, and he was a tall guy with a heavy Dutch accent. He says to the woman, "You are putting my coffee in a percolator? How could you do that?" And he proceeded in front of 20 other people to tear her apart. And then he gave her, so that she wouldn't leave angry, he gave her a half pound of another coffee to try. So she was happy. But it was like a show he was putting on. He wanted people in the store, 20 people, to hear his speech about brewing coffee the right way. And it worked really great. And it worked on me. It changed my life. And I realized that what we had to do in Seattle was to provide a tremendous amount of education to people in a very nice way, not the way he did it. We did we trained all of our people. We had like 100 people working in our stores, and we trained all of them to do that.
That's an amazing story. And I think that it does apply to every single company around here. Like, we are bringing innovation. We're bringing new stuff into the world. Sometimes you'll need to train and teach people how to use it and maximize.
Correct. And it's also really important, especially for something intangible like software, to talk about the benefit, not just the benefits, but the emotional part of it. I'm going to say, imagine how you're going to feel when the foreman on the floor of your factory comes to you and says, "This software is really making a big difference." I mean, the man we talked about earlier, Adrian Trucios, he gets calls like that all the time because his software really helps the operators of trucking fleets. So this is really important to keep educating and to make them realize what the benefits are going to be.
Great. Amazing. And as you can see in the comment section, Zev, everyone is very happy of having you here today in this session. Thank you very much for your time, for your experience, for sharing your wisdom. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to say that in every interaction I have with entrepreneurs, including this session, I learn a lot. in this case, I learned a lot from the questions, the kinds of questions. So it's always, both ways. Don't think that I'm Moses. I'm Moses with the tablets. I'm listening and watching. And thank you all for participating.
Thanks again, Zev. And thanks everyone for joining today. We'll see you soon in the next session. Kata, thanks for making it happen.
Bye, guys. See you next week.